Welcome to Big Dog Studio, a channel devoted to photography. This will be my first impression of a brand new 8x10 film camera made by the Intrepid Camera company of Brighton, England. This is their Mark II version. The camera is made primarily of anodized aluminum and multi-ply plywood, and it's based generally on a Dick Phillips style design, which is a flat plate and lead screw focusing. When Dick stopped making cameras, he hoped that other manufacturers would take some of his design principles into account, and that's exactly what the Intrepid has done. It uses 5.5-inch square Sinar lens boards. It has a maximum extension of 26 inches, so you can use lenses from 180 millimeters up to 600 millimeters. The reason I bought the camera is it's much lighter than any of my other 8x10 cameras. Many of my cameras weigh anywhere from 10 to 20 pounds or so, and that gets old carrying that around. So this at 5.5 pounds is going to be a big difference. Let's look at some of the features of the camera. I folded up the camera here, and let's move to the back. So you have the big main aluminum plate, and then bolted to that is a smaller tripod mounting plate. The plate is roughly 3 by 5 inches, and it's got two threaded holes, one for 3/16 or 3/8, I'm sorry, and one for 1/4 inch. So when I mount this camera, what I like to do is I have a 3/8 tripod screw here, a Gitzo, and I just screw it in until the threads disappear, okay, on the screw. And then I move to my tripod head here, which is a Gitzo Series 3 rational, low profile head, and I cut the back out of the slot, and you'll see why in a minute. So to mount the camera, I simply put that screw in the slot, lower it down, and tighten it up. It's very fast, it's very strong, you don't need a separate quick release plate or anything like that.
Now, this is a very light camera. On a bigger camera, especially one that has a smaller surface to mount with the head, I like to put two mounting screws in and slide them both in, because if there's two of them, there's no way the camera can twist. The holes on the bottom of this camera are too close together for the two screws, but it's so lightweight and there's such big enough area that I really haven't had any problems with the twisting. I mean, it would be nice if the holes were spread a little bit farther apart. I also have heard some people have said that that tripod mounting plate is too thin, so there's not a lot of threads to grab, and they've had some trouble mounting some of their quick release plates to it. So it would be nicer if it was a little thicker. I haven't had any problem with it though with my Gitzo here.
Once your camera is mounted, right, you want to open it up, and you do that on each side. There are two knobs that lock the back, so on this side and this side. So you open those knobs, and you just raise the back, and you can see right here there's a little notch in the upright, which will be when the back is at 90 degrees. So you move it up, clicks into that notch, tighten down the knobs on each side. Okay. Moving to the front. The front of the camera is just loose here. Right, everything is loose. You pick it up, and on the focusing bed there are 5 threaded inserts, and you can pick which one relative to what kind of lens you're going to use. So if you're going to use a short lens, something like 180 millimeters or something like that, you'll use one of these back threaded inserts. And if you're using a long lens, you'll move to the front. I'm going to put it in kind of like a 240 millimeter lens situation here. So this front standard has a bolt in the middle. You simply find the threaded insert that you want, tighten it down. Okay. Now there are two little marks on either side which help you line it up. Okay. Now there's two knobs on the front standard. This bigger one will control rise and fall, so I'm going to put that in a centered position which is pretty easy to see right there. Tighten those down. The smaller ones, lock down tilt, lens tilt. Okay, so if you want to shift the lens, you simply unlock that and push it to the side. That same knob does front swing. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to find which threaded inserts work best with my different lenses. I'm going to mount this up, put a square on it, so this is perfectly square, and then I'm going to draw a pencil mark across the front, so make it really easy to line it up in the future. Moving around to the back. The back, the only movement you really have is rear tilt, so we loosen these, push this out of the notch, and you can do rear tilt. Back up. There we go. Moving to the back of the camera. It comes with a gridded plastic ground glass. The back has leaf springs in order to hold the film holders in. I think some of the early versions of Intrepid had bungee cords, but these have leaf springs. So if you want to change the back's orientation and take off the back, you lift up these two clips, right? And then just push the back away and lift up. Now you can see this back has little magnets all around the perimeter which hold the back on, which is really neat. So let me put the back on. You line it up, slide it down. Okay. There you go. And the magnets grab it and snap it in place. These top latches are really just safety latches. They're not really holding it in. Okay, so do that again. We're going to switch to, we're in portrait mode right now. We're going to switch to horizontal. So just turn the back to the side. Slide it in, get it aligned. There we go. Clips right in, clips down. Let's talk about the bellows. So Intrepid makes their own bellows, and they give you a choice of colors, which is really nice. I picked blue, which I think looks nice. The construction quality seems to be pretty good. The bellows are a nice thickness. They're not too thick, which can make movements hard. The folds seem pretty good. They're maybe not as perfect as some of the really high quality older cameras were, like the Kodak cameras from the 30s. They're a little wavy here, but I don't really see that as being a functional problem at all. The bellows seem perfectly fine.
They're glued directly to the frames, okay, so you're not going to be changing bellows out for bag bellows, for wide angle lenses or anything like that. And if something happens to the bellows, you're going to have to unglue them and reattach them. I'm not a big fan of this. I would really like there to be bellows frames that can be attached and the bellows can come off. I just think bag bellows are a nice option, as well as any kind of repair in the future.
Let me show you how to mount a lens. So here's a 355 lens on a Signer board. The boards are 5.5 inches square, roughly 140 millimeters, and they're not beveled on the bottom. You have Signer written here, and I usually put that at the bottom. Okay, so what you do is you take the bottom of the lens board, there's a little red dot, and you want to put the bottom edge in first. So always have two hands on your lens. Okay, so push down, that's square, lift up on this little tab, so the back goes in, and slide it down. And now it's mounted. Signer sized lens boards are a good choice for an 8x10 camera. They're big, so you can use big lenses. They're widely available on the used market. Signer makes them, of course, but Horseman uses the same size boards. They're a good quality board. But for field use, we often want to use lenses on smaller boards. We're using smaller lenses. We want them to pack smaller. So I bought an adapter on eBay that goes from Signer to Toyo Field. My 4x5 camera is a Toyo, so I can just swap between them. Other people have Technica size boards, which are roughly the same, which are smaller boards, and you can get an adapter like that. So this mounts just like a regular lens board. Okay, and there it is. And now we can use lenses on Toyo boards. Here's a lens on a Toyo field board. It has a machined surface on the top for consistency, and it's beveled on the bottom to make it easier to attach to the camera. So let me mount that. And there you go.
Now, one of the things I noticed is that this mechanism on the adapter is much better than this mechanism on the camera for a couple reasons. One, these tabs up here aren't really big enough or angled properly to get any kind of grip on, right? Whereas these are. Number two, these just slide up at a diagonal, okay? Notice with here, the first move is horizontal and then up. You can see it's a little dog leg. And what that means is when this is locked in, which is real easy to do, when this is locked in, if it gets bumped up, it's not going to come unlatched. Whereas if this gets bumped up, it's possible that it would become unlatched. So this is more secure. Another thing is these washers are bigger, right? And there seems to be less play in the mechanism. And finally, and possibly the most important thing, I don't know if you can see it, the adapter board, this latch here is actually on an angled piece going in towards the board. So when you slide it down, it goes in, right? This goes just straight down. Where if the board doesn't fit exactly like this, there might be a little rattle, right? It might not hold it snugly. This holds it more securely, holds it snugly. This is a better latching system. I don't think for me it's going to be a big deal. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the smaller boards. I'm going to mount the adapter. I'm going to tighten down these bolts, and I'm going to just leave that on the camera. So that should be pretty good. Now, looking here at the front of the camera, a couple things I noticed is, this is all light trap area where your board is coming in and you don't want light getting in here. And this whole lip here, right, is all raw wood, light. And in the back, you can see the frame inside the bellows is all raw wood. And I'm not a fan of that because it can bounce stray light, you can lose contrast, you can get weird reflections and things like that. So I prefer to have that matte black, okay? It's not a big deal here because I don't think it's going to be hard at all for me to take some matte black India ink and just blacken those things myself. That's not a big deal, but I would do that if you get this camera. I would blacken all those areas on the inside. Okay, now noticing on the front here, there's a couple of levels. There's a level on the top of the front standard and a level on the back, okay? And I know people love levels on their cameras. The problem is usually they're wrong, okay? And these in particular are really slow. There's two little lines, but the bubble is much smaller, so then you have to estimate, is it touching the lines? And I expect, I'm happy to be wrong about this, I expect that they're not going to be all that accurate, okay? The best on-camera levels are ones that you can actually adjust and calibrate like Sinar does. You have two little screws, right? So you can set up your camera, you can set up a machinist level, right? Get everything plumb and square, okay? And then you can adjust your level to exactly match that, right? Because levels, over time, they get out of alignment or all this kinds of stuff. I'm going to like that. So I guess in this case, I'm not really expecting them to be useful. For me, they could skip them. I'd rather just use my pocket level instead.
Let me talk a little bit about the quality of the various parts. The base and the sliders all seem very good. The plywood is nicely finished, well machined. That seems good as well. The knobs for the front standards are of a good size, they're easy to grip. The center screw, I like the little wings, it makes it fairly easy to turn. The one thing that could be a little bit better than the knobs are the rear knobs. And they're a big enough diameter, right? But they're very thin. They're thinner than the front knobs, and they're a little harder to get a hold of. And that can be important because when you're in the field, you're often working in less than ideal conditions. You're having to reach up, or you're right on the edge of, a waterfall or something like that. So it would be nice if these were a little thicker and easier to grip. I think I could probably fix that myself by either different knobs or putting extenders on them of some kind, but those could be a little thicker. The other fasteners seem to be pretty high quality. These ones in back have locking washers on the back, so they should be pretty secure. These front ones, though, don't have any locking washers, and mine are kind of came a bit loose. And I would worry about them being a bit loose in the field. So I'm going to put a little dab of Loctite on them, non-permanent Loctite, and snug them up before I go. I think if I were doing a long trip or something like that, I'd have some spares with me, just in case. Moving around to the back of the camera is focused by turning this lead screw right here. And this has a knob on the lead screw that allows you to turn it easily. Now, I've heard that this knob is glued on, and they had some problems with them coming off. And in response, someone from Intrepid said that they're now pinning it on, which should be more secure. But that is something that I would worry a little bit about, because if this breaks and you're in the field, it's going to be very hard to use the camera. I'm a little curious. Some of the threads of the lead screw come out the back of the knob, and it would seem that you could put a nut on there that would hold that in. You put a little Loctite on there, put a nut on there, and it would be pretty secure. So I'm not sure why they didn't do that. They must have some reason. Okay. This is an 8x10 film holder. It holds 2 sheets of 8x10 film, one on each side. Right at the top there are these ridges that lock into the cameras to keep the holder in place, and this is how you load it. So at the top of the back are these 2 tabs that stick out. If you just press one out a little bit, you open the back where you can put the holder in. So I'm going to do that. So you go in and then you press down. Okay, now that little ridge I talked about hits these holders and keeps it from going all the way in. So what you have to do is actually pull out the holder and then pull out the back and then slide the holder so it goes all the way down like that. Okay, and that's in place for taking a picture. You then have your lens closed, pull the dark slide, and there you go. The system that Intrepid uses is a little bit different in the back mechanism. So usually when you slide in an 8x10 holder into camera, those ridges that I showed you on the top go into grooves on the back, on the camera side and on this side, and it snaps into place, which locks the holder where it is. And so the holder won't come out without actually opening the back more. So when you're pulling a dark slide out, there's no chance of the holder coming up by mistake and then ruining your shot. Okay, on the Intrepid here, it doesn't seem to have that. So if I'm just grabbing just the holder, I can kind of pull it up. Okay, so that's just something to be aware of, that you don't do that when pulling out a dark slide. I think what I recommend is I put a finger on the holder when I pull the dark slide out, just to totally minimize that chance of something going wrong. One thing you may have noticed is there's not a lot of room to grip to open this back. Often these tabs are bigger on other cameras. They're beveled on the inside so you can get your fingers in there. This is a little harder. So what I actually have to do to get the back out is I put my thumbs on the actual back frame and I take my index fingers and push the whole holder back and then pull up a little bit, which is a little different than you have to do on other cameras. I would like it if these were bigger and beveled, right? You also notice that when I'm just sliding this in, that ridge hits the top of the holders. On most other cameras, if that edge is beveled, it'll just, this back will ride over that ridge and go right down. Here's my Toyo field camera. So you notice right away that there's a lot of space removed behind these tabs for pulling back the spring back, so it's really easy to get your fingers in there. So let me insert a holder. Right? So there we go. Now I'm going to slide it down. And did you hear that click? So that's locked in there. You can't really pull it up. You have to actually open the back in order to get the holder out. Right? So you're not going to actually pull out the holder by accident when you're trying to pull out a slide. Let's talk about stability a bit. All right. So I have everything is locked down. All right. So if I tap the camera, it's not too bad. Okay, if I tap up here lightly, you see a little bit of tremor back and forth, which isn't unusual in a field camera. If I tap the back, there's a bit more of that fluttering going on. And it's just something you want to be aware of. You want to make sure that you wait just a few seconds after you put a film holder in or mount a lens or something like that. And just like any other field camera, the more you rack this out, the more susceptible you're going to be to vibrations. There's some things you can do to minimize that. Use a big tripod, make sure it's mounted sturdily, have a tripod head that fits underneath the plate well. You can use a bungee cord from the front to the back. There's different things you can do if you need to. All right. Okay, so I think the main reason for some of that flutter is that aluminum can be kind of springy, right? So you have the camera mounted in the middle and you have this flat plate going out to the sides, and it's kind of like a diving board, right? The farther you get away, right, the more movement you can get. Here you can see that there's a little bit of flex in that, and that's what leads to the wiggling back and forth. I think there's a couple of things that could be done, right? This could be made thicker, but that would make the camera heavier. Most of this distance here, and I think you're about 6 inches from where it's a plate to that corner, most of this is flat. Do you see how right here, this is a stamped piece and this is bent up, so that's really tall and that's not going to flex. It's the flat piece, right, that's being held horizontally that has a little play in it. So a couple things I think that they could do to make it a little more rigid. If you look at the back of the camera, this is all open here and flat and horizontal. If they made this a little longer and then bent it up, just like they did on the side here, but if they did that along the back, that would give quite a bit of extra height to resist that up and down movement. I think that would make a big difference. Also, these holes here, you can see that there's nice big holes here. The holes save weight. I also like them as a place to grab the camera. If I'm picking up the camera and carrying it somewhere, I don't want to grab the camera from the top. That puts stress on the sides. I do like that big plate, but that hole, it could be smaller, or it could have a cross member going through, or on the inside it could actually have some of that part that's removed could be bent up, so that there's more thickness right on the edges, which would lead to a little bit more rigidity. All cameras represent trade-offs between size, portability, rigidity, and so on. And I'm really excited to put this camera through the paces in its field, as it's going to be much easier for me to carry around. I will report back in a couple weeks after I've used the camera to tell about how it's worked for me. All cameras are compromises the different attributes from size, rigidity, compactness, and so on. And I'm very excited about using this camera because it's going to be very easy for me to carry around compared to my other cameras. It's lightweight, and that not only affects the camera, but it affects the tripod and the head used. I'm using a Gitzo Rational Series 3 head, which I think fits really well with the camera. I'm using a Series 3 Gitzo, which is plenty strong for this camera. I put the camera on a 12-27 Gitzo, a smaller tripod, and you know, it was pretty good. There wasn't really a problem. You want to be careful with a setup that's really light. It's easy to bump. It can be a little springy on grass and stuff like that too, so that's something to keep in mind. But I'm really looking forward to this camera. I hope that's helped you out. If you have any questions, please let me know and I'll try to answer them. Otherwise, thank you for watching. See you next time.